A very warm welcome to everyone joining us. Today, we're going to be speaking about the ultimate balancing act using consumer data and maintaining trust. This is our agenda for the day. We'll be talking about addressing consumer rights and building consumer trust and loyalty, how to demonstrate privacy compliance, and providing transparency to your consumers while maintaining the regulations. We have a very esteemed panel ahead of us today. I'm very excited to introduce my colleagues. I'm Damin Babu, the Product Marketing Manager here at TrustArc, and I'm joined by my colleague Joanne Furtsch, our Privacy Intelligence Development Director, and Ganesh Vasudeva, the Director of Product Management at TrustArc. Let's start with speaking about the evolution of consumer trust. Privacy has gone through various evolutions throughout the norm. Joanne, I would like to understand what's your take on the current state of privacy and this entire evolution?
Yeah, definitely. And, building trust, definitely takes a lot of work. And we all know that from our personal relationships, but, as an organization that's trying to build trust, especially when I first started in this space during the first .com boom, consumers were just getting familiar with websites and were very unsure about, interacting with companies online. And so the whole idea was, how could you get consumers to feel comfortable interacting with you online and entering their information, sensitive data such as, credit card information or information about their health? How did you build that trust with them? And there are a lot of different factors to companies had to consider, and sometimes that was really hard because you kind of had this new thing called privacy. And over the years, what companies realized is through other types of governance initiatives is you need a framework. You need, even as an individual, you kind of have your set of core values of how you interact with other people, and you build that trust based upon those values. Well, organizations need to do the same thing. So what we saw through this evolution is the rise of different frameworks like the NIMITY Privacy Accountability Management Framework. As an example, for companies to kind of base their activities on how they manage privacy, how they manage compliance, and also ultimately that leads into building that consumer trust. So basically, those guiding principles are key to guide the actions, so you can build trust and wrangle in all these different factors that you're seeing on the slide here to really really just hone in and focus on what drives your actions.
Very true. That's amazing, Joanne. And Ganesh, I was wondering if you would like to add anything to this evolution of privacy.
Yeah, certainly. I love this diagram. It kind of shows how fuzzy the entire data privacy ecosystem is, and it says that when it comes to privacy and consumer trust, it is not a linear journey. Over the years, in the absence of privacy regulations, companies have done what they thought was best for them. Sometimes it may not have been maintaining consumer trust. For example, when online marketing had to be done with the internet coming up, companies gathered any data that they wanted to regarding consumers from whatever places, and then just stored them and then used them. So, but since the privacy regulations are coming in, like Joanne said, and they are providing a structure and power to maintaining the privacy and hence gathering the consumer trust. So I love this diagram for that reason. It says how hard it is to kind of like untangle all these things and then get on the path of consumer trust.
Absolutely. So just, building on that, Joanne, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how brands are building consumer trust.
Yeah, and right now, trust is really, kind of nothing that's new. And, companies know that, it's critical to have that consumer trust because that leads to brand loyalty. And, that brand loyalty leads to growing your business. And so, consumers, especially with all these different laws coming out, are more aware that they need to take steps to protect their personal information and that they have the right to do so. And we've really started to, see this with the, passing of GDPR back in 2018. And in the US, we're seeing all these different consumer privacy laws coming about with Iowa just recently signing into their consumer privacy law to be the sixth state to pass one. Key thing is, consumers now understand, like the rights that we have listed on the slide, understanding they have the right to know what types of information is being collected from them, about them, ensuring that's accurate, being able to have inaccurate data collected, corrected, and deleted, being able to opt out of the sale or sharing, including for cross-contextual advertising purposes. So how do companies do this? And one, making sure that the privacy team and marketing teams are working together. And it was great to see through our poll that, a large number of you are working closely together in terms of privacy and marketing. And for those of you that haven't quite partnered with your marketing teams yet, or marketers who haven't yet partnered with your privacy teams, I mean, this is really, really imperative in ensuring that, consumers are able to exercise the rights that are allowed under all these different laws and regulations. But also, consumers are still concerned about their online privacy. I was reading the other day an article in CPO magazine, this was published back in November of last year, that says 60% of consumers that were surveyed are still concerned about their online privacy, and 34% of them are like being overwhelmed by all these different privacy settings. So really kind of the key thing, and my colleague, Ganesh, he will kind of dive into some of the more practical examples, but the idea is when you are providing mechanisms for people to exercise their rights, especially like around the sale data, sharing of it, being able to correct it, these mechanisms need to be like really clear, really simple, easy to use, not, obfuscating, one choice over another. We call those dark patterns, where like, oh, to opt out, it's like an itty bitty font. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure that, everything is equal and proportionate. So it's clear to the consumer what action they need to take and what that action is going to do for them. And so those are the types of things that are going to be critical to building that brand trust. So with that, I would say, this is why marketing and privacy need to work together, because there's a lot of different pitfalls that you could run into if the mechanisms that you're providing to consumers to exercise their rights aren't implemented properly.
Those are some great points, Joanne. I absolutely agree with you. I'm sure that this entire challenge that consumers are generally feeling with privacy, it's actually much easier said than done when it comes for companies. And so, Ganesh, I would love to understand exactly how this problem can be solved using technology.
Yeah, like Joanne said, it's very important that any business tells their consumers, their data subjects, what they are storing and for what purposes, and then adhering to those purposes while using that data. If they are selling or sharing the data, then they would also have to let their consumers, data subjects, know that who they are sharing it with. So that transparency is very important, like Joanne said, in maintaining the consumer trust. And if consumers want to revoke storing of the data, their data, or the consent to storing their data or using their data, those mechanisms should be done by businesses very easily. Like, it should be very easily accessible to the consumers. And so when it comes to technologies, like Joanne said, clearly having the access to privacy policy, access to submitting data subject rights. Perhaps those data subject rights are coming can be submitted through email or through voicemails, maybe through forms, whatever those are. Those are easy to submit and easy to follow when submitted. What is the status, and when there is a response provided for those data subject requests, when can a consumer expect that response, and when the response is given, is it giving all the information that the data subject requested, right? And then of course, then these particular data subject requests also have to be done within the due date that is prescribed by the jurisdiction, in that jurisdiction, regulation applicable in that jurisdiction. So all these things will have to be considered by a solution that facilitates this data subject request processing. And when it comes to consent and preference management, again, the principles are the same. The consumer should have an easy access to provide and then change their consents wherever it is published, wherever those forms are published. Maybe it is an unsubscribe link within the marketing emails, maybe it is within the mobile apps, wherever it is, it should be easily accessible and should be easy to use. And again, the most important thing is that it's not just collecting the consent, but also using those consents for only the purposes that are given by the consumer, right? And that is the key to developing the consumer trust. Within a solution, besides all these obvious things, maybe it is obvious to me at least, things that need to be incorporated within the solution, there is also aspect of security, right? So how the data is stored, how these data collected for consumers are stored. Are they stored securely? Because definitely no one wants the leak of this data, because that definitely results in losing consumer trust as well.
Those are some amazing points, Ganesh, and it actually is a great segue into my next question. You mentioned giving that ease to the consumers so that they can share their concerns, share their preferences, and also making sure that there is security. So just tying into that, Joanne, I wanted to understand about if you could talk about building a trusting relationship between the organization and the consumer. What should be the first steps?
Yes, exactly. And somewhere, here, you may look at this slide and go, oh, this is what I do to build trust with my friends or my family. Well, that also goes, in a business context too. Organizations need to take these same type of actions, especially when they're trying to, build their business, attract new customers, and interact with consumers. Really, first, tell people what you're doing, what you're going to be, what you're collecting, how you're going to use it. I mean, some of those things are going to be readily apparent by, how the consumer interacts with you. If you're asking for their email address so they can subscribe to a newsletter, well, they know they're going to provide their email address and they're going to get a newsletter. That's pretty readily apparent. But what may not necessarily be apparent is, are you going to sell that email address? Are you going to be sharing it with third parties? Or, are you tracking, how they're interacting, with your website or your mobile application? Or, are you enabling, advertisers to do that tracking to build up a profile? Those kind of hidden uses or processing purposes may not necessarily be so readily apparent in your interactions. So what you need to do is be transparent that these things are going on. And as Ganesh talked about a few moments ago, is that those mechanisms need to be readily accessible and available. And then you need to retain that trust. So, first you earned it. They like you. They're loyal. That, you got the repeat business. So now you need to retain it. And to retain it, that's where you need to be consistent with your actions and how you're managing their personal information. So again, if they're, buying things from you, they're trusting that you're not going to do something unexpected, and that the communications that they receive from you are consistent. They know that you're not selling their information, or if they're going to do something different, you're going to tell them and give them a choice regarding that. So those are just some of the key fundamentals of building trust. So just think about like your personal relationships and how you build trust with your friends, or if something goes wrong, how you have to rebuild that, and you do that through your actions. Well, organizations need to do the same thing. And again, this is why it's critical for marketing and privacy teams to work together.
That's a great point, Joanne. Actions, not just taglines, right?
Yeah.
Ganesh, are there any practical examples that you would like to add over here?
Yeah, so like we saw in the first diagram where it was like very fuzzy, organizations have have collected data over time. Maybe different departments had their own systems, and now the privacy teams are coming into picture with all the regulations. They may not understand what is being collected and where in what systems. So when we say that, yes, it is very important to show what is being collected to the data subjects and for what purposes, it may be very hard to do so in some cases where the data has been fragmented in many different systems, collected by many different departments, and then for God knows what data purposes. So it is very important that businesses choose a DSR solution, a data subject request solution, or a consent and preference management solution that is able to work with all these different systems and understand what is stored where, and be a single source of truth to be able to show what's being collected for a data subject and for what data purposes. And this is where, Joanne also said the privacy and marketing teams have to work together. I would even add and then say even IT department has to work with them to be able to do this, right? So yeah, so that is something I see with my customers all the time, the fragmentation of data, and then not quite sure of what's being collected where, for whom, and for what purposes. I think a good solution could bring all the data collection points and the systems where data is stored together, and then be that one single source of truth for easy maintenance and understanding. And I feel like that is the key to showing consumers what's stored for them and what for what, and then also further giving them ability to change any of those things.
That's great, Ganesh. In fact, it kind of leads into my next question right now. Some more practical aspects where we're actually talking about demonstrating consumer trust. You built it, you're trying to retain it, now actually showing consumers that, yes, we want your trust, this is what we're doing.
Yeah, so this is a very good slide. Let's talk about each of those. The consent, right? Consent must be granular, affirmative, and freely given, of course. Yeah. So like we said, for what we are gathering consent and having it as granular as possible for each data processing purpose is the key. And like Joanne said earlier, the option between opt-in and opt-out should be same. The opt-out should not be really small, and then opt-in kind of like defaultly selected or something like that. In fact, some of the regulations forbid that, right? They say that the opt-ins cannot be pre-checked, or the choices between opt-in and opt-in should be the same. All these things are incorporated in some of the regulations already. Marketing consent should be distinct from any consent to a terms and condition agreement and privacy policy, of course. Hiding this consent within small prints in privacy policy or some other kind of contract or agreement may not quite help businesses develop their consumer trust. And we talked about making it easy to opt in or opt out. One of the main things is, like, again, Joanne mentioned earlier, is making sure that if a business is selling the data or getting the data from other third parties, then they understand. In fact, this is one of the things I see all the time, that often businesses do not think that they buy the data or sell the data, but most of the businesses do. So it is very important to understand what they're doing, and they have consent to do so as well.
Yeah, and if I can chime in on the granularity of choice, one of the things to think about is where you truly need to provide choice, to making sure that it's clear. You don't want to be so overly granular, or you're providing so many different options that actually causes the opposite problem, where you have confused and frustrated consumers. So that's why it's really critical for marketing and privacy to work together, because it is a balancing act. And you want to make sure that your choice options are clear, and you're given consumers the appropriate level of choice based upon what you're doing. But you don't want to be so overly granular that they don't understand them. So it's really, I think, the critical piece of how privacy and privacy teams and marketers can partner together to make sure that you're providing choice that's meaningful, but also enabling to your business.
That's absolutely right, Joanne. And just moving on to our next question, I'll leave this open to both of you. I would love to understand from both of you, how can you address opt-outs across the US? I know there are so many laws coming in each day for each state. Please help us make sense of it all.
Yeah, and that is harmonization is kind of one of the key things. We're hoping to continue to see across these different U.S. state laws. The state of Washington, even though their law hasn't passed yet, seems to be the model that a lot of the states are following right now. And kind of the key thing that you will be seeing is, definitely a harms-based approach, where consumers can opt out of the sale or sharing of their personal information, under CPRA, sale of personal information under the other state laws. That is basically, giving consumers the ability to make that choice of, no, I don't want you to do that. As long as, the key thing is being clear that, they can access information around your practices relating to that. And that's what you're going to see, like, coming out with the updated CCPA regulations. The Colorado regulations were just finalized making sure that access to that information is readily available and clear, and that consumers can, figure out what they need to do and what their preferences are. And then also, especially with California and Colorado, looking at, global privacy controls. So, because consumers are getting kind of this consent or preference fatigue if they have to go to, website and mobile apps and, always, have to manage their settings. What we're starting to see, as a technology solution are these global privacy controls that, consumers can communicate their preference once, and, that needs to be recognized. Now, the devil's in the details and how companies need to do that. And that's, what we're going to be seeing coming in these regulations, especially out of California and Colorado, and how companies need to respond to these signals. Key thing is you need to recognize them, and then you need to honor them. As we recently saw towards the end of last year in the state of California with the Sephora case. And then with GDPR and laws like GDPR, such as LGPD and other laws that we see through outside of the US, it's really a risk-based approach, and getting that consent up front before the data is captured. And then the type of consent that's required is really based upon the risks related to not only what type of data you're collecting, but what also the processing purposes are. And especially as, AI, artificial intelligence capabilities are being used by more and more companies, it's really critical that, we are clear about what those preferences mean, and especially where decisions are being made about the consumer or assumptions are being made, information's being inferred based upon AI. It's really, critical to communicate that out to your consumers. So with the, rising use of these advanced technologies, consumer trust is really critical here.
Got it. In fact, with the introduction of each new law, you have marketers, privacy professionals, just organizations going into complete confusion as to how they can address this. Ganesh, I'm sure you must have experienced the same. How do I interpret the law and make sure that it's translated in my products? Is there anything that you would like to add specifically around, say, GPC? I know that's a very highly debatable topic itself.
Yeah, I definitely have things to say about GPC, but before that, there was a point in the previous slide which I think is very, very interesting, and basically about lists, right? The second point of relying on purchased email lists as a cornerstone of email marketing is a risky move. I think especially in US, where if there is an interest or at least an assumed interest by consumers in a particular product or particular topic, then businesses can send email to them, and then whenever that particular data subject or consumer says, hey, please stop the communication, businesses have to agree on that. So because of this, I do feel that a lot of businesses do go for lists still. Joanne, my question is really for you here, that what kind of pitfalls do you see for businesses when they do buy the lists, basically?
Yeah, the biggest pitfall that I've seen companies experience over the years is not validating that the consumer is consented to be on the list, and that's where companies tend to run into challenges, is that they don't have validation that the consumer has consented to have their information sold or shared with your organization. So you do want to, one, validate the source of the list, and then validate how are they getting the consent and do they have evidence of that consent.
Excellent. So how this translates to a product is, let's say that in a data subject submits opt out or do not sell my information or do not share my information request to a data controller, right? And if this data controller is selling this information to third parties, then the data controller is required to let those third parties with whom they have shared the information of the data subject know that this is the wish of the data subject, right? They have opted out or they have said, do not sell my information. So flowing these requests from data subjects or consumers all the way to all the third parties to whom the information has been shared or sold is important. So I think that's a really important point to note if you are collecting data and sell it, or if you are buying data from a third party.
Yeah, and the other thing too, as you're thinking through, how you interact with third parties and making data available to them, or you're receiving data from them, is how do you honor a consumer's preference, throughout that whole data stream and data flow? So if you're the organization that's, selling the data or sharing the data, and the consumer opts out, you need to communicate that opt out to the downstream third parties. Also, too, consumers have a right to know, like, who are you making their data available to? So, making sure that you're able to track that and that you understand those flows of data is really critical. And then if you're the recipient of data from another organization, you need to ensure that you're able to honor those opt-outs and, update or correct any information that may come to you from the organization that you purchased the data from. So you need to make sure that you're managing the flow on that end, because these, different laws that we've mentioned, the regulations, it's like the obligation just doesn't stop at one spot. It needs to be communicated throughout the whole data chain and the whole data flow of, third parties that, are receiving data from you, and making sure that they too are honoring the consumer's preference. So the trust chain, it doesn't stop with you, it continues.
I'm glad you brought up that point of Liz, Ganesh.
That I felt like that was super important and interesting point. Now we can move on to the GPC. GPC seems to be in everyone's mind these days. Consumers themselves probably have not adopted it as much, but regulations certainly talk about it and then give this particular control to the consumers to set their opt out on a browser on their device once, and then to any website the consumer is visiting, those websites are required to honor that global opt out that the consumer has set, right? So CCPA talks about it, CPRA talks about it. It's basically a browser signal set by consumer that the websites those consumers are visiting are required to honor. And there are many different cases here of known users, unknown users. If the user who's visiting a website is not known to the user, or if the website, if the business is not making any attempt in understanding who that user is, then what they will have to opt out is just opt out the user out of any ad tech, online marketing advertisements that they may be showing, right? The business may be showing to those users. If the user is known, and if user is, for example, let's say the consumer is enrolled in a financial incentive program, then the CPRA says that you will have to opt them out. You have to ask them whether they still want to continue in those financial incentive programs, and based on the choice that consumer makes, you will have to either opt them out or not. So there are some intricacies within the GPS that's CCPA, right, Joanne? CCPA, I think I said CPRA. CCPA says. And then CPRA explicitly says that if your user is known, then their consents, not just GPC, not just their global opt-out, but their any consent will have to be recognized across any of the devices that known user may be showing up, right, from. So that is something that CPRA says explicitly, and then CPRA has gone live, but with the grace period, I think businesses will have to conform to those to CPRA starting July 1st. So this would become very important as well to carry a known user's consents, not just a global opt-out, but any consent to any device that user may be coming from.
Wow, this has been so much of information in such a small session. I've certainly learned a lot. So this has been an amazing session. Joanne, Ganesh, I hope you can help us summarize this discussion in terms of laws, in terms of the products. Joanne,
Sure.
with the law. Yes.
Yeah. So the laws that we have seen come out, especially the theme across the U.S. consumer privacy laws, really are helping consumers to manage their information in a way that reduces harm to them. And so, and also holding companies accountable for their actions. So, that's kind of why the first key takeaway is, making sure that, if you're honest, you're transparent, you're honoring your commitments, that is one of the key steps towards not only building trust, but also towards compliance in general. And then, as Ganesh and I have both mentioned, marketing and privacy need to be partners, continuing to work together. So if you haven't already partnered with your marketing team, or if your marketing team hasn't, partnered with you, the privacy team, start building that relationship today and show, privacy folks are business enabling and, great partners to work with to make sure things are clear to your consumers and that you are honoring those commitments. And then Ganesh will definitely elaborate a lot more on the last point here, but you need technology. Things are complicated, and the requirements across these different laws, like while the core requirements are very similar in terms of, certain consumer rights of, giving them access, letting them know what you've collected about them, the right to correction, right to deletion. There's nuances though, like time frames are different. You may have to do some different verification steps. So these vary across the laws. And that's why technology is really critical to help you manage this kind of new web of compliance requirements.
Yeah, totally agree. I would even say that along with marketing and then privacy teams involve your and IT teams as well, because it is a combined effort. It is adhering to privacy regulations and then maintaining consumer trust is a combined effort. And when it comes to technology, choose the right product, the product that understands where you're doing business and accordingly understands the privacy aspects within the regulations that are applicable in those jurisdictions. Perhaps in one jurisdiction, opt-in cannot be, opt-in always has to be explicitly given by a data subject, and in another jurisdiction it may not be so. So a product that understands all of this and then accordingly helps you comply to the regulations in those jurisdictions is the key to use. And of course, this is not just when we talk about consumer trust, it is not just privacy. We talked about the security as well. The security aspects of data is important as well. There are many different things that we have talked about, like the opt-ins and opt-outs, whether they are passively given or actively given, like the versions of the privacy policy, and then the versions of the form itself using which the consent was given. All those things, like choose a product that helps you in understanding what regulations say and then adhering to those regulations.
That's a great way to summarize, Ganesh.
Definitely, as you look at these different requirements, especially if you're in the thinking about it or no bucket, as you're looking at as these regulations come online, and especially on the U.S. consumer privacy law side, and with varying requirements, software is really going to be key in helping your organization streamline its processes and how it responds to these different requests, and help consumers manage their choices. And look at privacy software that can integrate maybe with some of your other internal systems that you already use to help you do this. Because California, if privacy, back in January, the state AG here in California likes to give folks their annual Privacy Day present, which tends to be a string of enforcement actions. And this year, they were focused on mobile applications. So, make sure that you're thinking about this throughout all your interactions with consumers, no matter what environment, whether it's web, mobile, offline, because these do apply to offline collection, as well as how you engage with consumers offline, like in your brick and mortar store, as one example.
And it's really great that you brought up that point, Joanne. It's really great that you brought up that point. At my own organizations, I've seen, the companies, like when GDPR came in, we were like, okay, we need to have a cookie banner, or you have companies just scrambling and kind of in a frenzy and just getting that, one quick little solution to that problem, whereas some actually go all the way, think about the law, and like you all mentioned, go about thinking about the trust from all angles, and actually go into getting a data privacy officer, doing everything that actually requires to build that relationship with your audience. And that's so critical. And sometimes as small businesses, we tend to overlook these important little things, but these are the things that can actually go a long way, not just from a perspective of building trust, but also now with CCPR coming into the picture, CPRA coming into the picture, you have a huge number of regulatory fines also that could be applicable to you. So yes, we would request all our no's and thinking about it, organizations to always think about the larger picture. And Joanne and Ganesh, thank you so much for joining all of us today. I've certainly learned a lot. And thank you for our audience as well for joining us today. I hope you'll have a good rest of your day.